This is The Roadshow, and I'm your host, David Warren. Well, it's that time of year again. Time to put on a sweater and time to talk about the oldest continuously published periodical in North America, the Old Farmer's Almanac. Back with us again this year is Janice Stillman, the 13th editor of the Almanac since it began back in 1792. The new 2023 edition of the OFA is now available, and as expected, we'll give you a full roadshow review. Let's get started by welcoming back our friend Janice Stillman. Good to have you, Janice.
Good morning, David. It's great to be with you, too. You know, I so look forward to doing these conversations every year, and I just want to thank you for your enthusiasm, too, for the Almanac.
Well, you bet. It's such a tradition here at Oasis Radio Network, but I know that the Almanac, just owning one, is a tradition for millions of Americans.
Generations, yes. It's really remarkable, I have to say, even to me, that folks keep coming back year after year. I mean, we're delighted that they do, and we certainly create a book that we hope will satisfy them and give them the spirit of useful with a pleasant degree of humor that we intend, and Robert B. Thomas, the founder, intended from the first. But, it's a delight to be involved in the Almanac. We hear from folks across the country after each edition comes out, and, occasionally there's a comment, a little criticism, or some kind of challenge to a fact, but most of them are very generous and thoughtful in their praise.
Well, I am speaking to you from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, but we beam to many cities across America via satellite and, of course, around the world via the internet. But tell the people where you are physically today.
Okay, the headquarters of the Old Farmer's Almanac are up in Dublin, New Hampshire. It's in the southwest corner of the state, right at the foot of Mount Monadnock. And I would invite folks to go onto our website and view the Almanac offices here. It's Barn Red Building. Go to almanac.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, keep going, just roll that cursor down to the bottom of the page, and you'll see webcam. And you can click on the webcam. At any time of day, we have a camera rolling 24/7. You'll see the traffic going by. You'll see people coming in and out of the building. And what a lot of people find most interesting is you'll see the weather change. That is, you'll see the rain, and then you'll see the snow. You'll see the melt. You'll see the leaves change. You'll see the flowers bud. So it's really something that people are fascinated by. In fact, several times a month, actually, we have folks drive into the parking lot, and they get out and they stand in front of our webcam, and they send messages or at least pictures of themselves back to friends at home or elsewhere around the world, probably. So go to almanac.com, scroll down and click on the webcam, and you'll get an opportunity to see the headquarters of the Old Farmer's Almanac here in Dublin, New Hampshire.
I love that. And if I worked for you, I'd be a little leery about leaving early on a Friday.
Well, I would ask, don't tune in between 4 and 5 on Friday afternoons.
That's you out there in the parking lot wagging your finger. No, I'm teasing. But Janice, it's been a whole year since we talked about the Old Farmer's Almanac. Let's review some of the pertinent information for our listeners. You mentioned that the founder was Robert B. Thomas. I mentioned that this periodical was created back in 1792. But tell us the why behind the what.
Well, Robert B. Thomas, I should say, too, is pictured on the cover of the Almanac, and he's there with Ben Franklin, who was considered the father of almanacs, and so we put him there in honorarium. But Robert B. Thomas grew up on a farm in western Massachusetts back in the 1700s, and he read the farmers' almanacs of his day because, actually, farmers' almanacs are as old as dirt, so to speak. As long as folks have been growing food and keeping animals and just doing things by themselves around the house, kind of self-sustaining, they've wanted advice and tips and time-saving and money-saving ways to do things. So they've always been farmers' almanacs. Now, I should say most of them were pamphlets compared to today's, several hundred-page book. Mm-hmm. But Robert B. Thomas read the farmers' almanac of his day here in New England, and he decided that having a real enthusiasm for astronomy, he wanted to make an almanac that was a true calendar of the heavens, because that, in fact, is what an almanac means. So he introduced more accurate rise and set times for the moon and sun, more interesting ways to see things up in the sky, from the conjunctions to the various planetary events and the stars. Because folks didn't have wristwatches, they didn't have timepieces back then, and they needed to know when exactly the day was going to start and how long the day was going to be, and things like that. So he created a 46-page almanac and again, compared to today's book, it was really a pamphlet, but he introduced, tips on how to make butter, how to remove freckles, how to cure conditions in livestock. He gave the court times, that is to say when the judge was going to be in town and be taking sessions. He gave the vacation times for the universities, which then were Dartmouth and Harvard, because people who went to school, the students needed to know and their families needed to know when they were going to be available to come back to the farm and help either harvest or sow. So a lot of practical information. There was even an interest rate table, and back then the setting for the interest rate was about 6%.
Oh, my.
Because farmers needed to be able to calculate how much to pay their help, but also how much to charge for their goods. So it was a very practical kind of publication and continues to be. But Robert B. Thomas also introduced a bit of humor with anecdotes and pleasantries and little, as they call them, bon mots, little fun sayings and sentences, and trivia on his right-hand calendar pages.
I was just thinking about you, and you have a great sense of humor, Janice. Of course, you have a very serious job, but for what you do, you'd have to have a good sense of humor with this periodical.
Well, it's really a gift to not have to do bad news. Let me tell you. I mean, there is no bad news, no politics, no. The worst bad news may be that it rains on an event that or a prediction is for rain on an event that you've planned. But the Almanac content really flows from the calendar that I mentioned a moment ago, the fact that it is a calendar of the heavens. So we've got home remedies even today because people like pantry potions, and way back when folks were looking for simple cures to ailments and injuries. It's got recipes because, of course, again, you're still growing your food these days and occasionally keeping animals just like then. It's got profiles of animals and nature, gardening advice, best times to do various things, planting by the moon, which is a traditional practice among a lot of gardeners who swear by the idea of planting above ground or below ground based on the moon phases. Fishing advice, best times to go fishing. I mean, it all really flows from nature. It's all about the natural world, whether it be over your head or just around in the environment you're in. And I think what's especially important to note is that these days when we're all online in one fashion or another, on a phone or on a screen or in some other mode, the whole 24/7 digital world really exists on a different plane than the natural world. And so to be able to kind of sit with an almanac and have a couple of minutes to appreciate just almost literally what makes the world go round is really kind of special.
Well, in my opinion, Janice, I'm David Warren speaking on behalf of just myself here. I think there might be a misconception that when people look at the Old Farmer's Almanac, the cover, they think, oh, well, that's for farmers. But really, it's for everyone.
Oh, it is. In fact, there's something for everybody in every issue, whether, again, it's the recipes or just a digression, a change of pace from the news and the headlines. Certainly the astronomy information, whether it's an astronomy club or a science class in school, or just folks who really want to get out and, again, get your eyes off a screen and just look up into the sky and see what's going on, whether it's the moon in its various phases or conjunctions, or you hear a lot about the planets being available to be viewed these days, even with the naked eye. You've got the trends, what's going to be hot, what's not in the upcoming year. You've got so many fun facts. You've got quizzes and essay contest, profiles of farmers that, are making food for us these days, gardening advice and tips. And it's just really something for everybody, I think, in the Old Farmer's Almanac. And the beautiful part of it is there's something for absolutely every day, whether it's, again, a best time to do things from quitting smoking or weaning a baby or an animal or making sauerkraut, something that's very popular these days. People swear by the best days to do things, to, again, the sunrise and moon set times and various other astronomical events. I mean, don't we all this time of year look out the window and say, oh, the days are getting shorter, but by how much? And when will the sun set, in fact? So there's a little something for everybody every day of the year in the Almanac. And, let's not forget, a lot of people save them because they really enjoy looking back at that time capsule of the year. It reminds them really of so many things that happen from one year to the next. People make notes in their almanac and preserve them. And, it's really a treasure for a lot of folks.
I'm talking with Janice Stillman. She is the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac. She is the 13th editor and the first female editor. And how many years have you been there now, Janice?
22.
22. Well, you're the young one on the totem pole there then.
I've lost track of who's behind me and who's ahead of me in terms of tenure. But I've got a good few years in here. Yes, it's been a joy, though. Really, it's really been a gift to be able to be in this position and work with this content and the folks we have here on our team. And again, to hear from folks across the country about what they think of the Old Farmer's Almanac.
Well, before we take our break, and we're going to come back and flip through the almanac and talk about trends like we always do every year, this year being for 2023, we'll talk about what we can expect to see in a variety of areas. But I always was fascinated by the hole up in the top left corner. And then starting last year, I got an almanac that I ordered on Amazon that did not have a hole, and I ordered that same type again. It's called the Trade Edition, and I kind of like it better for me because it's a little bit bigger. I'm a little older. I use glasses, so I like the larger size, but there are a variety of styles, but make sure it says the Old Farmer's Almanac on it.
Oh, thanks for pointing that out, David. Yes, we do several versions of each edition. It really changes up the price point. For example, there's a $7.99 edition and there's an $8.95 edition, and the difference in those is 32 pages of reference material in the back. And the $8.95 edition is typically available at a bookstore versus the $7.99, which is available in many of our displays or just right off the shelf in a store, say a grocery store or a gardening store or the like. The edition you mentioned, which is this year I believe it's $9.95, does not have a hole, and it's sold on Amazon. You're absolutely right. And we've heard from a lot of folks about that. But to your point, too, it's slightly larger than the lesser price versions. The paper is whiter, and so as a result, the colors, including the black and white ink, are crisper on the page. So it's the equivalent of, or the best we can do anyway right now for a quote-unquote large print edition. We can't get the hole through the paper right now. We've actually been working with the printer in terms of manufacturing and seeing if they can make a drill that will go through and enough copies at a time to make it reasonable. But for example, with the newsprint edition, with the hole in the corner, the paper is thinner, it's lighter, and we can do 12 or 15 copies of the almanac at a time, pressing a hole through them. But the version you've pointed out, which is exactly like the hardcover, only a soft cover version, the paper is just too thick, so the drill won't go through it, and it would be really too costly to try to do only one or two at a time, and we're printing thousands of them, tens of thousands actually. So we try to give folks enough choices that it's affordable, and it gives them the version that they want. The whole is popular with so many folks, but again, the version that you have on and got on Amazon without the whole, it might be a little bit heavy for an ordinary piece of string anyway, because that paper is just a little bit thicker, so when you get 200-something pages of it, it's a slightly heavier book. But it is an easier read for a lot of folks as well. So, we do the best we can, and we hope that you find something that works for you.
Here's a quirky little thought as we get ready to go to break, Janice. But I was thinking about all of those punched holes. That would make some great confetti for you guys.
You're not the first one to say that, yes. Somewhere around here, there are bags of old editions, the holes from old editions anyway, sitting around here, and folks have thought of that. But, that's another marketing challenge, and it's just never really been moved forward. So I honestly don't know. I'm sure that since it's recyclable paper, that something good is done with that material after the holes are punched. But it's not been sold outright these days.
All right, that could be a good contest. Ask your readers, what should we do with all this confetti? You might be surprised.
Would you buy it?
Exactly. Well, I'm David Warren talking with Janice Stillman of the Old Farmer's Almanac, and when we come back, we'll have our annual flip through, including predicted trends for 2023. Back after this. I'm David Warren here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world. Well, it's time for the annual flip through of the Old Farmer's Almanac. The 2023 edition is now available at bookstores and on newsstands, also through the website almanac.com. And there's even the old-fashioned way of calling on the telephone, 1-800-ALMANAC. Okay, Janice Stillman, David Warren here, and it's time to talk about trends for 2023. And you have started on the farm, which is very fitting for the Old Farmer's Almanac. How will the farm look in 2023, Janice?
Boy, we're seeing some interesting changes. I found fascinating that in the same way that you can buy a share or a weekly allotment of, for example, fruits and vegetables at your local farm or farmer's market, you can also in many places now buy dry beans, grains, and even flours for baking. We're also seeing that urban farmers are cultivating people's backyards and giving owners produce as rent. We're seeing that farmers are potty training cows to go in designated areas to control the ammonia waste. We're also learning that, let's see, I had a good one here. Oh, urban vertical gardeners are in demand. These folks who can rappel up tall buildings in the same way that they climb up rock faces so that they can tend plants in the exterior of buildings. So the urban garden is really coming into being, and they're looking for folks who can tend those.
Here's a buzzword, grocers. Grocers, grocery stores that sell produce from on-site indoor farms. And being from Oklahoma, I see that cropland costs, the average rental cost per acre back in 2021 was $35 in the state of Oklahoma, $331 in the state of California, almost 10 times the cost to rent an acre. Wow. Okay, let's talk about the garden. Farmers love gardening and gardeners love to farm. So in position 2, in the garden, tell us about what's going on.
Well, we're learning that the gardener's growing passions range the full spectrum of planting. 72% of folks prefer flowers, 66% growing vegetables, 41% are growing houseplants. Fruit trees come in at 26%, and berries are popular among 19%. The top interests worldwide are container gardens. Now, of course, containers being pots instead of plots enable you to grow almost anywhere in the property. Vertical gardens are becoming more and more popular, and composting is growing in popularity as well. We're seeing plant containers of different sizes side by side to suggest a wild meadow on balconies, sidewalks, or rooftops. So even folks who don't have ground space are starting to grow more interesting things. And we're seeing people pairing naturally incompatible plants in nearby containers. So where they might fight in ground, they can look wonderful when they're growing in pots instead.
Janice, I found this interesting in the garden section of the Old Farmer's Almanac. 54% of young adults ages 18 to 34 would rather go to a garden center than a nightclub. That's promising.
That is interesting.
I love that.
That's amazing. Yes. And 48% of gardeners are planning to start seeds indoors for the first time. And that is a project because it's so much anticipation in seeing whether the seeds sprout and then keeping them healthy through the phase to get a few small leaves and then be transplanted. So, lots more folks are into gardening in great detail.
All right. Over here on page 12, I'll let you flip there, talking about good eats for 2023. Here's another buzzword, climatarians. Folks who eat local foods that are in season and avoid plastic packaging. And one of the things I put a smiley face by that people are talking about regarding food in 2023, food labels will develop bumps when the food is no longer safe to eat. That's clever. I like that.
I'm dying to see how that works. Yes, that is fascinating. What also I kind of enjoyed was the food fads include seaweed burgers and skincare goods made from food waste, like skin cream from coffee, eye care products from avocado, and citrus peels, shower gel from misshapen cucumbers. So lots going on.
I saw this under what people are talking about, ordering surprise bags of leftover, usually expensive food from restaurants and groceries at less than menu or store prices. I don't know about that.
I'm not sure how that's going to look or how that's going to work out. But,
hey, look, I got a lobster.
There you go.
Okay, over here on page 14, the health outlook for 2023. More people are actively managing their cognitive health. Good for them.
Right.
Good for us.
Right. We're hiking into forest to work on tree-mounted desks. Now, I'm in the woods up here, but I haven't seen a tree-mounted desk yet.
You know what I wrote next to that? Again, Janice just said that when hiking into forests, you're going to notice tree-mounted desks, and the first thing that popped into my mind was, what about the Wi-Fi?
There you go. I don't know.
Also, therapists are booking sessions on nature trails. I think that's a great idea.
It's a wonderful idea. Yeah, why sit in an office? And doctors will check our time indoors and prescribe the time in nature accordingly.
All right, let's go over to page 18. Around the house in 2023, we're talking about trends on the roadshow right now from the Old Farmer's Almanac. Architects are building homes with accessible design features, zero-step entry points, full bathrooms on the main floor, and wider doorways to avoid renovations later. That's smart.
It is smart. I think it's for a lot of older folks, but also folks who just, have difficulty getting around. This is fascinating to me, too, though. Future homes, iceberg houses with multi-level basements. That is, I guess they're multi-level homes. But most of several basements, instead of just one cellar, you'll have two or three of them. And this one, too, houses that rotate for varying views. I don't know how that's going to work, but this is what they say is coming.
And removable roofs on houses for adding floors later. Interesting.
Different, really different, yeah. And we get all this information from a woman who goes into deep research for about 6 months. She contacts all kinds of experts and just makes this huge collection of information. She sends it to me. Between the two of us, we decide what's going to stick in the book. And she is remarkably thorough and surprisingly accurate. I mean, for the months moving forward into the new year, we're going to start to see some of these trends that she's identified make news in the headlines.
Okay, let's go over to page 22 as we're getting ready to wrap up trends for 2023. Let's talk about our animal friends. Now, Janice and I, neither one of us has a pet because we're always at the office or in the forest working at our desk. But a lot of people have animals and love their pets. Janice, what will change for 2023?
Well, we're going to see a lot of folks getting new kinds of pets. Miniature goats are going to be popular. Small mammals such as guinea pigs, hamsters, and rabbits are going to be popular. Reptiles, bearded dragons, geckos, and snakes are going to be popular. And birds are making a comeback. Because birds have been popular for a while, but there'll be more and more of them in the upcoming year or so.
Talking about pampering for our pets, doggy daycare centers will offer rubber floors to ease older pooch's joints. And here's another smiley face I put. Hotels are going to download a guest's pet photos from social media, display the pics in the guest's room, and offer maps to pet-friendly restaurants. Boy, that's going the extra mile, Janice.
Well, I go one further on that one. Realtors appeal to dog owners with videos of a seller's dog showing the home as well as local parks, so you're getting a tour by the dog, which is kind of fun.
I bet that is so cute. Okay, finally, over on page 28, culture in 2023. What's changing in our culture?
I found this fascinating because even this morning on the radio, somebody was talking about it. There was an interview about Christmas trees and the cost of them, especially this coming year. So the Almanac says we're renting potted Christmas trees to be returned to the nursery after the holidays. And even this morning on the radio, I heard folks talking about using alternate bushes and shrubs as Christmas trees and keeping them in pots or even returning them. So, as I said, these trends start to make the headlines pretty quick. And we may see more and more of that this year. We're also seeing that cities are mapping their trees' locations online with weeding and watering times so that people in the neighborhood can help to maintain the trees in their community.
Here's what's on the horizon in our culture. Loud devices that will make waves to push toxic particles into the atmosphere and leave healthier air below. Also, trucks that will store exhaust on board to offload later and or store underground. And Janice, I live in an apartment, so I especially like this. Speakers that will emit sound waves to block street noise from apartments. Bring
There
it
you go.
on. Bring it
Yeah.
on. All right. Well, I'm David Warren, talking by phone with the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac, Janice Stillman. When we come back on today's program, we'll give you this winter's and next summer's for 2023, the forecasts for our various listening areas. You've heard me say it year after year. The Old Farmer's Almanac boasts of an 80% accuracy rate with its weather forecasting. How did it do this last year? We'll tell you about that after this.
I'm Karen Jensen Salisbury, one of the hosts you hear on the Oasis Network Roadshow. For 35 years, this 1 hour of the day has inspired and motivated you, our listeners, with thousands of stories of people whose lives demonstrate the truth that with God, all things are possible. It's an hour that you should make a part of your day, Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.
Today's guest back with us for our annual chat is Janice Stillman. She is the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac. I mentioned that she is the first female editor from the 13 editors that have been there since 1792. The Old Farmer's Almanac is the oldest continuously published periodical in North America. And one of the things that I like to talk about from time to time when we're together, Janice, is that there are full, complete sets. I know that you all have a couple, and there's one at the Smithsonian. How many full sets are there since 1792 of the Old Farmer's Almanac?
Well, I don't know exactly because there are some in Smithsonian, as you pointed out, and there's a facility, an organization in Massachusetts, the Antiquarian, I believe it's Antiquarian Society, something like that, down in the Worcester area. They have a full set of the Old Farmer's Almanac as well. And I imagine there are a few others out there. Certainly people in their homes have some. We have an archive space right here in the building where we have, I believe it's at least one copy, maybe a couple more of originals. In fact, we've got some original editions from the very first bound editions into hardcover, where they put 8 or 10 of them per book, and we use them on a regular basis as resources. For example, we use the Farmer's Calendar essays from back issues in the Country Calendar and some other projects that we use. So we're always going into the archives to kind of see what the thinking was decades and centuries ago and see how it relates to, the current thinking.
I would be curious to know, what is the first area that somebody goes to in the almanac when they pick it up? Now, I know where I go to first, and it may be because I know you and I like you. It's the letter to the patrons that you do every year, because I want to hear what's new from you.
Well, I think what a lot of people look at is probably the calendar pages to see when their birthday is and what's happening on that day, and also maybe the weather forecast in their region to see how the weather's going to be on their birthday or some other special event that they have planned. I know a lot of people do read the To Patrons letter because we do occasionally hear from folks about that. And it's really an opportunity for us to share a little bit about the history of the publication and maybe what's new and different from year to year. And that's always in the front of the edition.
Hey, Janice, I want to mention that our sound man today, his name is Tim Maroney. We're going to hear from him a little later on in the program. But Tim, shout it out. How many years have you been here? I'm hearing 28 years. So he has been at the controls every year that you and I have done this annual chat, Janice. But the reason I bring up Tim, having been here so long, is because you had your own Tim there for many, many years, and you did an in memoriam tribute to Tim Clark. Let's take a minute to talk about this man. What did he bring to the Almanac?
Oh, Tim Clark was exceptional. He had a memory like a steel trap. He could remember anything from decades ago down to the latest detail. He was a folklorist by education. He was a teacher. He was an excellent writer. He was fascinated by everything, just this natural curiosity about anything and everything in the almanac related or in the natural world. He was a fact checker for us as well as a writer. He wrote a number of terrific articles. In fact, we've got one in here. His first article for the Almanac was called "How Happy Is the Clam?" playing on the idea of, I'm as happy as a clam. Well, how happy is a clam? And several other little idioms that he played with. He really was a fun fellow to work with, and he died rather suddenly about a year and a half ago now. You'll see a photo of him, and again, the in memoriam we sort of dedicated to him. And he wrote a lovely verse. he was a fellow who wrote the weather doggerel. That's the forecast in rhyme that runs through the calendar pages. He did that for several decades. And he said every year he'd say, don't give it to anybody else. And, sadly, of course, after he passed, we had to do that. But his retirement note to everybody here at the company was just a delightful example of doggerel, because that was his favorite thing to do. And if you don't mind, I'd love to read it to folks.
Yes.
And you'd find this on page 101 with a picture of Tim and a little bit about his history here at the Almanac. And this is what he wrote. And so my Yankee sojourn ends, with thanks to you, my loving friends, expressed in this neglected genre with due respect and utmost honor. For you I'd send a fulsome bloggerel, compose a tuneful Indian raggerel, consume a New Year's Eve inaugural, revive the long-extinguished quaggerel. Here's a toast to in Navy groggerel. May all you live high on the hoggerel. Leap slim and spry as any froggerel, heroes of a Viking saggerel. No more, before I start to sloggerel, my arteries begin to cloggerel, become a bump upon a loggerel, I'll halt this halting hound of doggerel.
That's
It
great.
is just so clever. It's some made-up words, which is what doggerel is. It is so Tim. And, certainly when he wrote this, and really that was his retirement letter. It was half of the statement. And, he had no idea how events would turn, certainly. But it's just fun. It's so Tim. He was just a delightful person. He sat right outside my office here for several years. And I remember I was doing one interview, and the fellow made reference to how many times the Almanac was used, for example, in television and various other situations in other media. And I was trying to remember the name of a movie, Katharine Hepburn movie. Mm-hmm. And as I kind of waffled for time and kind of tried to cover up my failed memory, I heard from the hall right outside Tim shouting whispering actually the name of the movie. It was called The Desk Set, mm-hmm. and the Almanac is mentioned briefly. But I mean, Tim this again example, he knew everything. He could remember anything. He loved the Almanac for its treatment of nature and its astronomy, and the way it was just all about how the world turns. And we miss him sorely, and even today, I can't believe he's gone.
Let's talk about another man that works there, still does, meteorologist Michael Steinberg. Tell us what he does.
Well, Michael has been our meteorologist since 1995. That's quite some time ago. And in fact, this was his last official year. He actually supervised two new fellows who wrote made the forecast for the weather this year. But Michael was a professionally trained, of course, long-range forecaster, and took great pride and pleasure in working for the Almanac, and had, I think, a remarkable history of being, almost always spot on, 80% accurate. And we've got two new fellows, Brian Thompson and Bob Smerbeck, who are writing the forecast for us now. And having been trained by Mike, we do believe that they'll be, perfectly suitable and maintain that historic accuracy rate as well.
Janice just mentioned an 80% accuracy rate, which is the average, but last year's accuracy rate for predicting temperatures was down to 50%. It went down from 72%, but for precipitation, it rose from 78% up to 94% in predicting precipitation. So that gave the Almanac an overall accuracy rate this last year of 75%, which is still very, very good.
Well, it's a little bit below the traditional 80%, but we'll take it. Let's face it, it's kind of crazy times we're living in. And with our forecast being made about a year and a half in advance, looking at the full scale and scope of the forecast. But with the long-range view that we take, we're still pretty reliable.
That is incredible. You all predict the weather a year and a half in advance.
Well, let's put it this way. For example, the forecast for 2023 came in January of 2022, and they extend into the period of October 2023. So in that regard, we're looking at a year and a half forward.
Wow.
So it's not, it's a rolling year and a half, so to speak. But yes, certainly we take a longer view on it than just about anybody else out there.
Okay, well, let's talk about the forecast for winter 2022 into 2023. What will it be like overall, Janice?
Boy, it's going to be a mixed bag, and it's really pretty much a story of two sides of the country. So east of the Rockies, we're looking at very cold temperatures for the most part. In some places, heavy snow, in some places, cold and dry conditions. I'll get into detail in a moment. But west of the Rockies, we're looking at milder temperatures in general, more patchy snow, if you will, a little bit more precipitation. But generally, right on the continental divide, we'll see west of that, we'll see milder temperatures. East of that, we'll see much colder temperatures right across from coast to coast.
Here's the forecast for our different FM station listening areas, and I think this is the first time that it's the same for all of our stations: Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Missouri, Ohio, Virginia. It's just interesting that for this winter, cold and snowy for all areas, including your area there in New Hampshire, Janice.
Oh, in fact, yes, and several snowstorms are predicted. My recollection is that, December certainly will get things going, and it'll sort of feel Christmassy, if you will, throughout most of the month. It will feel like in the holiday spirit. But then as soon as we hit the new year, things are going to get much chillier in many parts of the country that are, going to see snow and cold temperatures. And then February, look out, because that is expected to be the coldest period of the winter. Often is, as they say, as the days grow longer, the cold grows stronger. But it's going to be a very cold winter, so if you can get ahead of your fuel, purchase something with a way that you keep your house warm, that would be helpful this time of year. Get your car ready, and cold and snowy, and then when it's not snowing, it could be raining, so look for ice to form as well in many parts of the country. So kind of a mess, right down almost to the Gulf Coast and north to the Canadian border.
Okay, well, for time's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and read the forecasts for our FM stations for the summer of 2023. For Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and then the Ozarks, hot and dry. For Ohio listeners, you can expect warm and dry conditions in summer 2023. And for our Virginians tuned in today, expect some warm and rainy weather for summer of 2023. Well, I'm David Warren, and my special guest on today's program is the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac, Janice Stillman. After the break, we'll announce this year's winners of the annual recipe and essay contests. Back after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. Well, the Old Farmer's Almanac is available at bookstores, newsstands, on the website almanac.com, and by calling the toll-free number 1-800-ALMANAC. I'm David Warren, your host on today's Roadshow, and back with us again this year, Janice Stillman, editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac. And Janice, you can get a whole lot more things on almanac.com besides the almanac. What else do you have in your store?
Oh my, we've got numerous calendars: the weather calendar, the moon calendar, which is hugely popular, the gardening calendar, the country calendar, the everyday box calendar, which is one of those page-a-day, little some item for every day. The planner, which is a hardback spiral-bound book that's become very popular with folks. And I shouldn't forget, of course, the Old Farmer's Almanac for Kids, going into its 10th year now. It comes out every other year. No advertising, undated, just wonderful publication. Kids can't put it down, and parents can't wait to pick it up, as we say. The Vegetable Gardener's Handbook has been a remarkable bestseller because, again, so many folks are growing things to eat. The Flower Gardener's Handbook has become a very popular companion to that. We're working on a Container Gardener's Handbook, by the way, so folks can look for that in a year and a half or so. But that, in addition to all kinds of gifts and novelty items and aprons and kitchen cloths and temperature gauges and artifacts for the garden and displays of accessories in a number of categories. It's really just a fun place to go. It's almanac.com/store.
Well, the recipe contest for 2022 was any recipe using bananas, excluding banana bread, because a lot of people that would be their go-to. So you had to take banana bread out of the equation and get really creative in the kitchen using bananas. And there was a tie this particular year for 2022. Tell us about the first place tied winners, Janice.
This seldom happens, and we went bananas just trying to figure it out. Yes, we usually only have, of course, one winner for each category, first, second, and third prize, which are cash prizes, by the way. But this year it was too tough to call. So we've got a banana stuffed peanut butter French toast. And it is just yummy looking right there. It's oozing peanut butter and dripping in maple syrup. And then we've got a spicy banana shrimp stir fry. And there's, again, a delightful picture of that in the wok type dish. And both of them are absolutely excellent. So you can have one for breakfast and one for lunch or dinner. Then you've also got banana pops, which are frozen pops that you can put on a stick. And then the last prize was the easy sticky banana squares, which are made with marshmallows and bananas and brown sugar and butter, of course, and a couple other things. And it's like a little cake square that you can cut out, and you're going to love them.
Like a lemon square, but it's banana.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, tell us about the recipe contest for 2023.
Next year, it's ginger, and that can be dry or fresh ginger. If you've got a great recipe using ginger, loved by family and friends, send it in, and you could win one of the cash prizes, as I say. So get it into us by the end of January 2023 using ginger. It should be your recipe and not published elsewhere, but send it in at almanac.com. You'll see a contest entry page, or also mail it to us at the Old Farmer's Almanac, Dublin, New Hampshire. We'll get it here. 03444 is all you need to put on the envelope. They'll find us, and just mark the envelope as recipe contest.
Okay, it's time now to reveal the 2022 essay contest winner. It is a lady named Sarah Wild from Arena, Wisconsin, and the theme for 2022 was my most memorable wildlife experience. And so, Janice, if you'll do the honors and read the winning essay.
Okay, I just want to point out that we received hundreds of wonderfully wild tales from folks, and it was, again, a tough decision, but this is what won. Our trip to Galveston, Texas to camp for spring break, a bust, our van load of friends began the trek back to campus in Wisconsin. The sun had long set by the time we reached Big Thicket National Preserve north of Beaumont. We drove in after hours to find the gate open with a sign instructing us to find an empty site and pay in the morning. As we wound through the bayou, we noticed warning signs along the drive. Beware of alligators. Alligators in area. Watch for alligators. This seemed ominous. The Spanish moss hung from the trees while ground fog rose as we pulled into an empty site. While friends were setting up tents, I set up the camp kitchen, preparing a late-night dinner in the damp, late winter chill. Then I heard it. The leaves rustled, sticks moved. There was a distinct sound of tent nylon being tested, and I jumped on top of the picnic table with a shout of, "Alligator!" Everyone paused, ready to run, and as I turned toward the tent that my boyfriend had set up, I saw a very startled armadillo looking back at me.
And
So,
I typically read the second prize, but I have chosen to read the third prize regarding this person's most memorable wildlife experience, and this comes from a man named Peter from Queensbury, New York, and he writes, I was one of 5 civilian guests of the U.S. Air Force attending an Arctic survival training course. On day 4, a C-130 transport outfitted with skis touched down on the polar ice cap above northeast Greenland. With the temperature at negative 55 degrees Fahrenheit, Sergeant Jesse instructed us to immediately dig a shelter. My survival partner and I struggled to dig into an 8-foot-high wall of bulletproof snow and ice. As we labored, I thought of the rare white beluga whales that I hoped to see. I had whales on my mind. During that night, I dreamt that I heard whale vocalizations, lots of whales singing to one another. I woke up excited and shared my dream at breakfast. I quickly learned that nearly everyone had heard the whales. We realized that a pod of whales had swum underneath our survival camp during the night. For me, this had been more thrilling than seeing a beluga whale. Our survival shelter was an acoustical chamber constructed with ice. As the whales swam beneath us, the clarity of their songs reverberated within the void, songs that replay in my memory to this day. I like that. Okay, what about the essay contest for 2023, Janice?
Okay, if you've got a story about a funny thing that happened to you, send it to us. We'd love to put it into the essay contest pile. Send it to almanac.com/essay contest, or put it in the mail to us, as I mentioned a moment ago, to the Old Farmer's Almanac in Dublin, New Hampshire, 03444. that tells a story about a funny thing that happened to you, and it may win a cash prize and get published here in the Almanac and on almanac.com.
Awesome.
And keep them, by the way, keep your essays to 200 words or less. That's important.
All right. Because we have to read them on the road show, and we can't just go on and on and on. Well, there are many wonderful articles in the 2023 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac. You mentioned How Happy is a Clam, written by the late, great Tim Clark. But there are also articles called Why Birds Feather Their Nests, Delicious Dishes from a Ukrainian Christmas, Egg Hatching 101, and The Myth and Mystery of Mistletoe. Before we say goodbye, Janice, what's your favorite article in the Almanac this year?
You know, every year I think I probably answer the same way, and that is the next one. As soon as an article comes in, I'm fascinated. I mean, I love the idea of proposing articles and getting queries from folks, but, it's always the next one. Bird Nest was really fascinating. The story about hatching eggs, making chicks, that is, as it were, and the folklore behind it was kind of fun. We've got a great story on spiders. I did not know that you cannot farm spiders because they're cannibalistic and you'll end up with only one big spider. It's just so many things are fascinating. Story on a home remedy story on the hay fever.
Yes.
I'm not a victim of hay fever, but just the history behind it and how folks would deal with it was fascinating. Propitious planting, special days, and traditions. Oh, there's a wonderful story about a century ago. A woman used to have her clock set. She had a wristwatch, a clock that she would carry around to different businesses and tell them the time because not enough people could afford clocks. This was in London. And it's a story about how she and her family maintained this small business of walking about telling people in businesses what the time was. It's fascinating. And then this really, really wild idea of a clock being built in the mountains in the West. Let's see, where is it being built? Near Van Horn, Texas. It's a fascinating story. This high-tech clock being built in the hills, and you have to walk up to it. And it doesn't say when it'll be active, but it's just kind of remarkable because the Old Farmer's Almanac is all about time. So anytime we get an opportunity to present a different dimension of time, if you will, we look to do that.
I love how Texas is west to a person living in New Hampshire, Janice. We call that south where I'm from. I'm in Oklahoma.
There you go.
Hey, it's been a delight to have you back with us, and I look forward to next year talking about the next Old Farmer's Almanac, but the 2023 edition is now available at bookstores, newsstands, almanac.com, or by calling 1-800-ALMANAC. And as we do say goodbye, I want to mention that people can follow you all throughout the year on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, and you guys are constantly posting fun things that people can stay connected with you all.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yes, social media is so important. And, we have millions of people. I think there's 1.5 million total on all the various social media. So join us, sign up, or just even visit, try it out, and see what you think. There's contests and all kinds of fun information every day, several times a day.
Excellent. Well, I'm David Warren, and I'll be back after this final break to read from that article Janice mentioned about hay fever. It's called Sneeze, Wheeze, Itch, Drip. It Must Be Hay Fever. Now, our longtime roadshow sound man that I talked about earlier, Tim, right here to my left, is a champion sneezer. So I'll have some natural remedies for him and anyone else who could use a tissue right after this.
The Road Show is a listener favorite, which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Road Show also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup, and contact information and links to our Roadshow sponsors and its hosts. So join us for the Roadshow, whether on your radio or on your computer at oasisnetwork.org.
Welcome back, everybody. David Warren once again on the Roadshow, and what a thrill to have Janice Stillman back with us from the Old Farmer's Almanac. I look forward to this every year, and I'm glad that you tuned in and hopefully look forward to it as well and enjoyed the program. And do you hear that heavy breathing over there? That is our sound man, the guy that likes to sneeze a lot. His name is Tim Maroney, if you missed it earlier in the program. And so Tim is a transplant from the East Coast, kind of like Janice, course, Janice still lives up in Dublin, New Hampshire, but Tim has not done really well with the hay fever issue. And there's an article in the Old Farmer's Almanac about hay fever, and they include some achoo facts for you. And these are natural remedies. So, Tim, I had you in mind when I read this, and I thought this might help you and some of our other listeners.
I'm open because your sister helped me with some natural remedies.
Okay, well, this comes from naturalist Pliny the Elder, who lived AD 23 to 79. So not that long on the earth, but, people live longer now. But he believed that kissing the nostrils of a mule would cure hay fever. Are you willing to try anything?
No, I don't think, I don't know any mules.
All right. Now here's one that you may have tried already. Sip stinging nettle tea to relieve symptoms.
Yes.
Okay, it's called stinging nettle tea.
Yes.
I've seen that at the health food store.
I better get my pencil out and take some notes here.
Stinging nettle tea. You can also eat pineapple, whose enzyme bromelain has anti-inflammatory effects.
I have been eating more pineapple because it's also good for digestion.
Did you? Because you buy these things called pineapple sticks. You've given me some of your. Now, did you know that this helps with hay fever as well?
I did not. I knew it helped with digestion and also eyesight.
Okay, according to these achoo facts for you and everyone else, you can consume yogurt containing live cultures or foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids, such as salmon, halibut, tuna, cod, sardines, shrimp, and clams, and that should help with hay fever.
It does.
And I've heard this one. Take 1 granule of local bee pollen before hay fever season. If no reaction occurs, increase the amount of bee pollen slowly, working your way up to 1 teaspoon per day. I think I would have started on 1 teaspoon. That seems so small to me.
I guess that's why honey works, right? Local honey.
Right. So that comes straight out of the almanac. And some precautions. So here's some things you don't want to do to keep that hay fever at bay, so that you do keep it at bay. Stay indoors when the pollen count is high. Well, everybody knew that one. When driving, keep car windows closed. Okay, that makes sense. When outdoors, wear a hat and wrap around sunglasses. This is pretty intense, Tim.
Oh.
When you come in from outdoors, wash your hands and face and run a damp cloth over your hair. Take a shower and or change clothing.
That does help. I've done that.
Okay. But that's when you go home, not when you come to work.
That's true.
Okay. And
well, I can wash my face.
Now, this is a good idea. Change your pillowcase often.
Yeah.
Because it would be on your hair, like pollen or, what's the other one called? I don't have a lot of time to dig into this, but goldenrod, I think, is the name of the other thing that causes a lot of sneezing.
In the cool weather, we've been sleeping with the window open, which probably doesn't help.
Well, probably not. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with something out of the anecdotes and pleasantries section of the Old Farmer's Almanac. And just as Tim is prone to sneeze, he's also prone to laugh. So if you ever want to read some corny jokes, you want Tim handy. See, I didn't even read a joke, and he's already laughing. And this is under the header, This Year's Cringers. I think these are pretty cute, though. What do you call a pig with laryngitis? What do you call a pig with laryngitis?
Voiceless bacon?
Disgruntled. Now,
Disgruntled.
Listen to the answer carefully to this to make sense. Why do bees stay in their hives during winter?
Do bees stay in their hives?
Why do bees stay in their hives during winter? Swarm.
Swarm. It's swarm.
You got it. Why is dark spelled with a K and not a C?
Dark with a K and not a C. Because, I don't know.
Because you can't see in the dark.
Oh.
Why is it unwise to share your secrets with a clock?
Oh,
Why is it unwise to share your secrets with a clock?
that's a stumper.
Well, time will tell.
Oh.
And finally, when I told my contractor that I didn't want carpeted steps, she gave me a blank stare. All right. Thanks again to Jana Stillman. Thank you, listening audience, for tuning in once again. Thanks to Tim Maroney for being a good sport.
Thank you, David.
And also for being here. How many years?
28.
28 years.
28.
Well, for Tim Maroney, Jana Stillman, and of course, I'm David Warren, it's been another great road show. You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.